We're doing this show because it's real and we're vulnerable about it, and it's a struggle. So, to all of you who are listening, you benefit from our struggle.
This is A Fit Mess with Zach and Jeremy.
All right, here we go. This is The Fit Mess. I'm Jeremy and he's Zach.
Hey, what's up, everyone?
Thanks so much for listening to the show. It's going to be, I think, an interesting conversation. Zach and I try very hard to be open, be very vulnerable on the show, and sort of share our struggles with whatever it is, our fitness routine, our home life, whatever it may be. For me, I'm sitting in front of the microphone right now on a beautiful sunny day in the middle of fall in Seattle. And that's extremely rare. And it's been very cloudy and rainy and dark and heavy. And I think all of those words can pretty well describe the way that I've felt the last few days. Even now, I'm feeling a little bit of relief. I got outside. I got to ride my bike on, a very nice day. That always brings some relief. But prior to that, the last few days, it has been very dark. I've been struggling with some pretty heavy depression. And that may be seasonal. That may just be because it's my life. But from that experience, I try to remember over and over that the only way through it is resilience. And we have a couple of experts that we're going to talk to here in a little bit that have gathered a great deal of stories about resilience, people overcoming tremendous odds to come out the other side, to go literally from chaos to clarity, as the title of the book implies. So we'll hear from them in just a little bit. But like I mentioned, it's been a hard few days for me. But I'm here. I'm trying to share that, to again just be real, to be vulnerable, to show that this is something that I go through. Zach, I know you're all the way over there on the other side of the country, just living a peachy, perfect life. Am I right?
Something like that. I'm definitely not looking out at the sun. I'm in my basement looking at a wall, and it's really cold out here in New York. So
yeah, it's like a -4 or something for you, right?
I think it's like 35 right now.
Jesus.
But
Awful.
we had our first snow the other day, so that was a little depressing, but it's a good thing. I've been told I have resilience, so I got through it.
Well, you're sort of proving the point that I keep trying to tell myself. I've shared on Instagram and various places that the diet has been sort of off the rails. Exercise has been hit and miss. I've been pretty good this week, and that may be also helping sort of lift the cloud a little bit. But we were just talking a little bit before we hit record here, and you were saying that you are sort of doing all of the things. You've got your diet dialed in, you're exercising, you're doing a lot of things to sort of battle the demons, and it's working pretty well for you.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it keeps me above water. It's so quick to set in, but yeah, I've got the exercise kind of dialed in. I joined a new gym, a CrossFit gym, so I'm actually like going for the community, which is cool. And I think that alone is a contributing factor, right? It's not just working out and eating right. It's,
it's the connection that we talk so much about.
When we talked with Johan Hari, it's, a lot of depression is the fact that we are so socially connected through applications that we're not physically social with anyone anymore. Mm-hmm. So having that social outlet is really important to me. And, having moved to New York, I really didn't have, a group of friends like I had in Seattle. So, that hit me pretty hard. But, I think I said a few episodes ago that when I do get down into one of those funks, I have to use it as a reminder of, this is why I do all these other things, mm-hmm. to keep myself just above the water. Because most of the time that's where I'm at, just above the water. So, working out, eating okay. I've been trying cryo freezing my body. That's been pretty cool. Doing compression therapy.
Okay, so yeah, I have questions about the compression therapy because I think you've shared, at least with me and definitely online, one photo, but you've shared a couple photos of this compression therapy. What the hell are you doing to yourself?
So it's really, it's really useful, like right after a really hard workout, when you have like a bunch of lactic acid built up in your muscles, and it really just compresses and moves the fluid around in your legs so that, you ever worked out and then 2 days later you can't walk because you're so sore?
Yes.
This doesn't make it go away, but it makes that pain significantly less.
Okay.
And you heal faster.
How is it different from like an ice bath or like ice packs?
Very different. So when you're cooling yourself, that is going to reduce inflammation for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things that happen when you're cooling something, but for the main reason for cooling a body part is to reduce the inflammation there. The compression is actually moving all the fluids and things that are going to make you sore, the lactic acid, out of your leg.
Interesting.
And flushing them out of your body. Or your arms, or your my favorite is actually the hips. It like squeezes the crap out of your butt and just compresses your hips.
I get it now. I get it now. You're just trying to get a little action.
Yeah, it's the only action I get. So,
well, that's cool.
But it's cool. It's fun.
It looks very intimidating. Like, are you stuck? Like, does somebody have to get you out of it?
The arm one, someone has to get you out of because they're actually so compressed, like you can't bend your arms.
Uh-huh.
The leg ones you can get up at and out of. Like the hip one is like a big pair of underwear that you put on. And it's a little weird at first, but
it does. It sounds ridiculous.
No, I tested out the I took a look at like what my range of motion was in my hips before and after, and there was like a few degrees extra of range of motion in my hips after I did the compression on my hips.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting, but the cryotherapy has been really helpful for me. I think even just like one shot in there, I noticed like my whole body felt better.
Now, I think you tried that in Seattle before you moved back to New York. Is it pretty much the same? Like, explain what the cryotherapy is that you're going through.
Yeah, so it's pretty much the same thing, but in Seattle, I only did it a few times because it was like $60 a pop.
Yeah.
And that was, a little pricey for me. Mm-hmm. Here, the gym that I go to, they have a whole cryotherapy section that includes like an infrared sauna. And if you're a member of the gym, it's $100 a month for unlimited usage.
Oh, nice.
So from a financial perspective, it's like a no-brainer if you go and use it 3 times. But so cryotherapy is, I guess it's liquid nitrogen. It's super, super cold. So there's a couple different levels that you can use, but I do level 2 for 3 minutes. And what that means is I get into a chamber that is cooled and continuously cooled and spraying liquid nitrogen on you. That is tuned to negative 135 degrees.
Jesus Christ.
It's cold. It is like the first minute and a half, you're like, all right, this is slightly uncomfortable. But then after the last 90 seconds, like my forearms and my calves start to hurt. Like, that
it's
pain.
Got to be like hypothermic. It's how I don't understand. Because like a cold shower is maybe 30 degrees?
Not even. It's like 40.
Yeah. And that's brutal. Like if you're, if you start doing it, you can get used to it, but it's brutal to stand under cold water for 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, whatever. Negative 100 and what?
135. That's negative 135.
How is it healthy? How does it not kill you?
And that's negative 135 Fahrenheit, by the way.
Right.
No, it actually, because it's just hitting your skin in like a gaseous form, it doesn't feel that bad like it at first.
Okay.
Like it gets really, really cold. But when you turn the cold water on in the shower, like that's a shock.
Right. Okay.
Whereas
So it's the boiling frog.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay.
But it only takes about 10 to 15 seconds before you're like, whoa, this is cold.
Okay. And so the point, though, again, getting back to the ice pack analogy, is it the inflammation? Is that the point of doing it?
For me, it's the inflammation. Yes.
Okay.
But then there are some other benefits too. So when you do put yourself into, when you freeze your body like that, you essentially trick your nervous system into kind of doing a little bit of a reset, and like all of your blood pools back into the core of your body and becomes super rich with oxygen. And it kind of stays rich with oxygen for a few hours, and you have like a euphoric feeling and your brain fires on all just a little bit better. So, but my reason for doing it is for inflammation, because my whole body is, I mean, if I look at something that has gluten or sugar or dairy in it, my body gets inflamed. So,
well, that's because you can't help yourself and you shove it all in your face.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. But like, I mean, when I eat keto without dairy, it's just when I get the carbohydrates out and do all these other things, like I can feel it. Like, it's weird. I feel like my body is smaller. And it's just inflammation.
Interesting. I think I've been going through some of that myself, just in constantly sort of starting over with my diet. I just sort of constantly feel like crap, either because I've eaten something that my body is rejecting, or I'm trying to purge it from my body and not sticking with it long enough to get to that clear point, that point where your body's just like, oh, okay, yep, that's how we're supposed to work.
Yeah.
So that is this sort of vicious cycle that I keep just rotating through, either purging or filling it with toxin, terrible nonsense. And so then that sends me down this spiral that I'm on. And so where I'm falling short this week with diet, which hasn't been too bad, I've really started over with exercise. And I know one of the first things that I did when I first, took on all of this effort and trying to go down this path and go on this journey of better wellness, it started with yoga. So I started with that on Monday. I just went down and did my little 20-minute yoga session. And it's the weirdest thing. The yoga itself is not challenging. It's a really beginner level thing that I use, but I could feel something emotionally open up, and I sort of forgot that element of it. Like I approached it so much from just a physical, like I just need to move my body and stretch and do some sort of exercise. I approached it from that method or from that point of view. But there's this weird emotional unlock that happens. And I know it's so much like meditation when I do that consistently, where you do release whatever it is that you're holding on to through focusing on breath and not getting caught up in all that stuff. And I see so clearly now how my thoughts overrun my day. I have a hard time letting go of things. I'm just stuck. And when I do yoga or when I do meditate, I can so clearly see the change, the two different ways of being. And when you're starting over like I am, it's such a big mountain to climb. But each little step I know is toward the right thing, but sometimes it's exhausting. Sometimes it's overwhelming to think about how much work it's going to take to get back to feeling the way I did, and then how much work it's going to take to maintain that, and how much, no matter how hard I work, it will never stop. The struggle will never stop. If I'm consistent and I stick to it, I'll build up the resilience, I'll build up the strength and the mental, fortitude or whatever to overcome those challenges better or to get through them better. But it's so hard sometimes to accept that the struggle will never end. I will never get to a point where life is just kind of easy. And I don't know, that's just the most overwhelming thing sometimes. And it just is enough to completely knock me down and make me want to give up.
Well, I hate to get all project managey on you, but the first thing that comes to my mind is the whole eating an elephant analogy. How do you do it? And it's just one bite at a time. If you're looking at, and from a project perspective, and I look at my life as a project. It's just one ongoing project with no end date.
Right.
When you look at the whole thing, it's really tough. Like it doesn't, I totally agree with you. Like, look, thinking about everything that I'm going to have to do just to get into the grave safely is, is a little bit overwhelming, but it's, you know, you
and what a
you gotta
shitty way! What a shitty way to end the project. By the way, like, I don't know.
I don't know. I think that's that. I mean, that's completion. I mean, as long as you're climbing into that grave with a minimal amount of regrets, because we're all gonna have them, and you've done the best that you can. I'm okay with that. You know, like for me, that's okay. Because wow, this got dark, dude.
That's okay.
We can. Yeah, no, when that day comes, I don't want to have a lot of regrets. I know I'm going to have some.
Yeah.
And one of the things I know I will regret is that I didn't just take it day by day and figure out what I needed to do to feel good for that day.
But see, I think that's where I struggle so much, is that I know that. I'm fully aware of being in the now and you know, today is the only day and all that shit. But sometimes it gets so heavy that I can't, you know, I can't find the strength to lift the book that will help guide me in a new path. I can't, you know, get on my bike to go ride, even though I know it will help. I can't just sit and meditate, even though I know it will help. Or even when I do, the thoughts are too strong and I can't beat them.
Right. But you do reboot eventually and you get back to feeling good. And I mean, let's use the analogy of a computer. Occasionally we need to reboot, right? Mm-hmm. Things just get too much and we need to shut down, start over, and come back up and operate a little bit smoother.
Yeah. And that's,
unless you have a Mac, then you just run forever.
You just run forever. No problems whatsoever. Unless you spill a beer on the keyboard. So I've been told.
No, who would do that?
Yeah. So I think I'm at the point where the circuitry's overloaded, and this is one of those points where I'm either this morning I hit reboot and things are just sort of coming back online, or whatever. I don't know, but I also need to find a way to be okay with that, because you know, when I lose the fight, I lose big, and it takes a lot of work to get back in it. And so that's where I'm just kind of lacing up my boots and getting back in it now. And, you know, it's overwhelming. You know, I've said on the show before that if I look at the list of things I did to get to what I felt like was sort of a peak, I never would have done it. I just sort of did them one thing at a time. But now that I'm aware of all the things I need to do, it's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming, but you've done it before.
Yeah.
You know, and through the whole process, you've built resilience, which we'll hear a little bit more about. But that's kind of the key to it is being resilient. And I don't know. I don't know how you get resilience short of having to struggle through things.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think anyone's pre-programmed with, you know, an exceptional amount of resilience.
You develop it. It's like any other muscle or any other skill that you develop. It's something you have to work on. And that's what we are here to do.
Unfortunately, those of us who have struggled the most have a lot of resilience. And I think we'll hear, you know, that to be true with, you know, the authors of the book and the multiple authors of the book that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. And those authors are Reverend Patricia Cagganello and Kathleen O'Keefe Kanavos. They are the authors of Chaos to Clarity, Real People, Real Pain, Real Stories of Transformation. I'll tell you, if you're the kind of person that likes to read about people overcoming the odds, overcoming impossible challenges to get to the other side and to be better for it, this is the book for you. We had a chance to talk to them about this book, sort of how it came together, and to share some of these stories. Let's just start with the book. Where did the idea come from, and how did it come together?
Well, this is Patricia, and the idea of the book came from ultimately, initially, my spiritual journey. You know, our company is called Sacred Stories Publishing, and what I've learned over the years is not only do I learn and draw inspiration from my experiences and my stories, but from sharing and hearing of other people's stories. And so in conversation with Kat, she's had a lot of similar experiences like that. And so together we were were having a conversation, and we were saying, what if we kind of put a call out around the world and asked for other people's stories, their hero and heroine's journey, and see what we get. Just ask them to share with us a significant event in their life, and see what we get. And what we received back really just kind of blew us out of the water, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk about that. Some just amazing stories of resilience that come out of each of these individuals. Can you talk a little bit about sort of maybe what surprised you as you started collecting these stories?
One of the things that really surprised me, this is Kat, was how when Patricia and I were reading through the stories and doing the first editing sweep on them, we suddenly realized there was this amazing golden thread running through all the stories. And that thread didn't matter whether it was men or women, and we have both in the book, men and women, because it's a global voice. The thread was that when they were down and out in their deepest funk, whether they had lost their spouse was killed, or their spouse died, or they lost a child, or they just got out of an abusive relationship, they reached out immediately and looked for other people who were in a similar spot in their life, and they gave them a helping hand. And by helping them up out of the depths of despair, out of their chaos, they both walked together into clarity, and that just blew us away. Every single story, and we did not ask for that. It never even occurred to us. It was just a natural byproduct.
And to kind of add to that, the other thing that was really just so beautiful is that, again, we kind of put a global call out, and people from around the world, we have Japan, South Africa, Europe, Canada, United States, as Kat said, men and women. And what we found is that regardless of the situation, and some of them are joyful stories, some people's significant change was, lovely later in life, or, other joyful situations, and some are battling life-threatening illnesses. I mean, they run the gamut. But what is really the common thread of all of them as well is that the shared emotions that everyone has. And so whether it was fear or, as Kat said, despair or joy, it doesn't matter even the situation. We find ourselves in the emotions of others, and that's what kind of brings us together. And that was just so powerful as we were compiling the stories we chose in the book, was the shared emotions that we as humans, have.
So is that in the book you mentioned the phrase worldwide oneness on several occasions, and I really liked that phrase to the point where I wrote it down and wanted to ask you about it. Is that what you've just described? Does that encompass the worldwide oneness, or is there even more to it than that?
Well, I think that our world is experiencing catastrophic shifts right now on a physical and emotional level, and change can be really frightening, yet change is the natural process of life. And we wanted to show that without change, without that kind of pain of change, that rebirth of ourselves, there's no future. And out of chaos comes a clarity for a new order in life. And I think that on a global level, we're all experiencing that. And so those in the book who were extremely sensitive to global change found that it was affecting their lives on a personal level. And we wanted to show that so that other people out there who are going, oh my gosh, I just can't take any more, because some of the authors in the book were contemplating suicide, and now they're so far removed from that, and they're so successful, and they're so happy. And so one of the things that Patricia and I, when we saw that, one of the things that we wanted to do was work our insights into the book from a psychological point of view for the psychology of change, is what I did. And then Patricia focused on the spirituality of change. And that gave the book that extra little bit of information that allowed people to focus on the messages a little bit better.
And in addition to that, Zach, to answer your question, as Kat said, I wrote on the spirituality of change. I'm an ordained interfaith minister, and so my journey has been a very spiritual journey over the past 8 years. And one of the things that we share in the book, again, is the shared emotion, or I have a quote in the book that came to, really kind of felt a few years ago, that is, in the experience is the emotion, and in the emotion is the gift. And what I found in my journey, and what I talk and teach about, is the idea of the personal journey and then the collective journey, and they really are parallel. And it's almost like the microcosm and the macrocosm, but there's nothing that we can do individually that does not have a profound ripple effect out into the collective consciousness. You could even just think on a positive aspect, the idea of prayer, global prayer. What does that work? It's that concentrated, that collective energy that comes together. And on a less positive aspect, you can think of a mob mentality or something like that. So what we do, what we feel, what we experience, how we show up in this world has a profound effect, not only on ourselves personally, but on the larger collective. And that's another aspect of the worldwide oneness that really shines through in this book, and that's why we're just so delighted the way this book came together and to share it, because we see it as having a really positive, profound effect on that larger oneness.
There's so many directions I want to go with that, and one is going back a minute. You were really talking about change and the significance of change, how powerful it is, how scary it is. It's funny to me how the universe works sometimes. Last night I was watching Netflix. There's a show called The Mind Explained, and it was talking about change and how scientists over the years have been able to look at memory, and the most significant memories that people hang on to throughout the entire span of their life are the ones where there was the most significant change. And with that change often comes the most growth. And I know for me that's the case. It's whether it's getting a new job or trying, a diet that works, that makes my body work better, trying a workout routine that works better. When I first started doing yoga, the emotions that unleashed, just those, it's just so interesting to me how so many people fear change so desperately, but that is where the real growth in this experience comes from.
Absolutely. I call change the golden nugget in the book. And part of the spirituality of change is that exactly what you just said, Jeremy, that change is our event. It's the change event in our life that allows us transformation. And if we choose, it can be on a very profound spiritual level as well. And the reason, I would suggest for that is because it catches our attention. We're so busy doing, and we're so distracted with everything that's happening all around us all the time that we just kind of, I was leading the quintessential 50-something soccer mom Northeast life, raising my kids. I was doing life. It was fine, but I was doing it. And it wasn't until I had an event that significantly changed my life that it caught my attention and really, lurched me onto my spiritual journey. So absolutely, we have to have our attention caught, for lack of a better word. In the old paradigm, or what happens most of the time, it seems that it happens through illness, or it happens through trauma, or it happens through pain. We need an emotion deep enough to stop us and to say, well, what's happening, and now we have choices. That's the change event. And ultimately, it can happen in joy as well. And I'm hoping that's part of where this book takes us and where my work takes us, is that we can have those deep emotions that stop us in our track and affect change in our lives. But, that's kind of the spirituality. And Kat, from a psychology perspective, you speak in the book about how change is the number one phobia. And
it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, because it's fear of the unknown, and when we come through it, like you were talking about, Jeremy, when we come through it and we find that we're okay, we're still alive, and we're all right, then we just hang on to that memory because we kind of need that memory in case we come up against change again. And it's reassuring to us. And so the stories that we hold in our mind about our personal change gives us a blueprint for rebuilding our world when the change happens again. And so in a way, all of these stories are a GPS for those still on their journey to transformation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if I can just add one more thing, because one of the things that I write about in the book, among the stories, there's 30 stories and they're profound. And as Kat said, we give our perspectives based on our experience. One of the things that I write about, and it's titled, it's the end of the book, it's called What's the Plan, Stan? And I speak about that idea of change, like Kat says, the unknown, and somehow whether we choose the change or it's thrust upon us, somehow we're afraid of it, or it's fearful or upsetting to us because somehow we think we will be worse off than we maybe currently are, even if we're choosing it. There's that concern around it. And so what I speak to is the perception of the change, the perception of the way we ask the questions, the perception of how we show up. So my example in the book was a question I asked myself a few years ago, which was, what am I going to do the rest of my life, and how am I going to support myself, for an example, years ago. And I was like, whoa, well, okay, that was enough to bring anybody to their knees. But what if, because my question is laced in that something is not going to be as good as it is today, I'm going to be losing something, even if it is an aspect of my identity. It will be less than I am today. But what if we were able to view the change in our lives and ask the question differently, a little bit more lighthearted, or with hope, or courage of knowing it can be better. So instead of saying, what am I going to do the rest of my life and how am I going to be able to support myself, I ask, what's the plan, Stan, right? And somehow it doesn't seem so overwhelming and it doesn't seem so bad. And it's kind of a lighthearted, almost like a lighthearted story, but the essence of it is some really profound, information that people can use in how they're perceiving, to look at how they're perceiving the change.
So I want to switch topics just a little bit and ask you a question about some of the stories that are in this book. I certainly identified with some of them. My favorite one in the entire book was Shift Your Focus for Change by Eileen Bild. The phrase, that she used in that story, take me or heal me, I'm not doing this anymore. I absolutely loved that part. And reading that story, I really identified with it, and we have very similar paths in a lot of ways. The whole reason that we do this show is because I suffered through so much stuff and I got through it, and I want to give it back to the community. So that one really struck me. It was very profound. What is your favorite story in the book, and why is it so important to you? Which stories?
Well, I really loved the foreword. There were a number of them, but I really loved the foreword of the book by Dr. Bernie Siegel, because he talked about something that boomers and a lot of people are going through, and that's the loss of a spouse. When a spouse dies and you're left behind, and what do you do? It's a big change in your life, especially when you've been married as long as he has. And my story in the book is something that baby boomers are going through now, which is losing your parent. And you suddenly find that after you've lost both parents, you're an orphan. You're no longer a child, you're an adult, but you are an orphan. And so I thought that those perceptions of the chaos to clarity that many people are going through in their lives right now was really interesting to me. But Eileen Bild, her focus on fibromyalgia and the pain she was in, and not really wanting to go through that pain anymore, and shifting her focus onto how she could find clarity in her future was an incredible story. She, during a life coaching session, she had her aha moment, and then she got these words, I am a guiding light, to show people the way, and that was her turning point. That's where she decided that her significant shift just rocked her world, and she was going to stay in it.
I think it's really difficult to pick a favorite, to be quite honest, and I'm not copping out. I will tell you one that I think is one of my favorites, and the reason is they're so varied, in topic, and I think some of our favorites, as you mentioned, Zach, is what we can relate to as well, right? But my favorite, and I think it's because I have a cousin who's just recently gone through breast cancer surgery, but it would be Connie Bramer's story, and it's her story of not only surviving breast cancer, but even dating after breast cancer. And, she even tells the story about online dating and how the gentleman wants to know why her hair is so short. And she finally put up a picture of her hair, and it's maybe, an inch long, and she said, I'm just recovered from cancer. And he was like, yeah, well, best of luck to you. Sorry, I'm not interested in, dating someone who just went through cancer or something like that, something just completely and totally just not unkind, just unconscious and unkind. But her story is laced with such great humor and self-deprecating humor, and how she moves through everything. And I love her story, one, because unfortunately so many people today are suffering with an illness, and breast cancer being one of them. But she really shows, as Kat said before, the GPS, she really shows a way through it and a way out, and her way is through humor. And so I just think she has a great story in the book.
That is a great story. I really enjoyed her response to that gentleman about the bus. That was enjoyable to read.
So, it's relatable. I think that's what Kat and I were both reading these stories, and we're like, these are just so phenomenal because they're so relatable. And again, whether or not any of us have that particular experience, we can understand the emotion. We know how she's feeling because the emotion is what is universal.
Right. So how many stories did you guys have to weed through? I believe you said there's 30 stories in the book. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, I think there's about 30. And we read through every single story that came in. And I have to tell you, every single one of them were truly wonderful stories. But some of the stories just didn't fit in this book. And so it wasn't that they weren't good stories. They just didn't fit in the Chaos to Clarity book. They were more like stories about growth or something like that, or memories. And so we simply told those authors that we loved their stories, because we did, and that we would save them and keep them in mind for another book, but it wouldn't be a good fit for this book.
Because this book really is about a significant change, what really kind of stopped you in your tracks. So what was the change? What is your journey through the change? And then what is your positive perspective or outcome on the other side? We really wanted to show the journey. We wanted to give hope and inspiration, again, to go back to the GPS, something where people can read it and draw courage, draw inspiration. Storytelling is as old as time for many reasons, but I believe one of the main reasons that storytelling is so profound is because it is such a non-telling way of, well, you have to do this, or you should do that, or somebody trying to fix your problems. You can simply read a great story, have the experience that you want to have, or that's resonant to you as the reader, and then you decide what you want to do with it, how it affects you. And that's what makes them so powerful.
And every single author in this book is a hero in their story. I found that just phenomenal. We asked for the story to be as a hero's journey, and every single author was a hero in their story, and some of them pointed out other heroes in their stories too.
And one other thing I just want to mention about the people in the book, which is so phenomenal, in addition to being men and women from around the world and countries around the world, they're all ages. We have early 20-somethings, and we have people that are in their 80s, in late 80s, and every age in between that have written. And, unless they tell you in the story, give you a clue to how old they are, you would not know, because, again, the age doesn't matter. The story, the emotions are universal, and we feel them, really at whatever age we're at. And again, that's part of that unifying human oneness, you find in this book.
You could really see that in some of the stories where the authors were very late in life and they were falling in love again. And they fell in love with the same intensity of a 16-year-old. And I found that so refreshing.
That's funny. You mentioned the sort of the journey that people take when they do embark on something like so many of the people in these stories, like Zach and I have done, just the decisions that we make to sort of face our fears, face the challenges. I can't remember where I read it, but I saw a meme or something where somebody mentioned that the challenges and the struggles and the changes in life, they don't ever stop. There's never a point in your life where, you've made it and everything's smooth sailing, but these stories of overcoming change and building resilience make those moments easier to manage because you grow from them, you get strength from them. Are there, we talked a little bit about focus shift when it comes to change and sort of reframing the question of what am I going to get out of the other side of this? What would you suggest to somebody who is facing a big challenge right now or has a big change coming up and they're worried about it? What are some tricks that maybe they can employ to try and make this process a little bit easier?
For me, what was a really big shift in my life was when I realized I wasn't alone. And that was another reason of wanting to do this book. When I was going through my life event, and I write about it in the book, I didn't believe, honestly, that anyone else could really understand how I was feeling. And when anybody would ever ask me, how are you doing, I'd say, fine, everything's fine. And it wasn't until a cousin, I kind of opened the door a little bit, and his response to me was life-changing because he responded to me something, he said, honestly, I'll just tell you, he said, may peace find you and wrap you like a warm blanket. It's a text I get from I call him my alpha male cousin, and I was blown away. I was like, where did that come from? How does he know? And then I realized, oh my gosh, if he just wrote that to me, that means he understands how I feel. And if he understands how I feel, which I didn't think anybody could, that means he must have experienced it. He must have felt it. And then I was like, oh my gosh, if he's felt it, that means other people have felt it. Other people know. And it opened my eyes, honestly, not to look and see the wounded walking around me, but to realize that there's really people out there that could get it, that understood my pain, and so I knew I wasn't alone. And that feeling right there is when we can get to that, then we know there's hope. And we know there's a hand somewhere, and we can make it. Because if somebody else has felt it and they've made it through, then we can make it through as well. And honestly, that's really what I hope our book, Chaos to Clarity, does for others. It's that hand. It's that hand to say you're not alone. Read the stories. Find your inspiration. And for me, I really think that's the first step. That's the first step through. Is that connection.
All right, again, the book is Chaos to Clarity. And the authors, Reverend Patricia Cagganello and Kathleen Kanavos. Thank you so much to them. Really just fun folks to talk to about some rather heavy subject matter, but I'm glad we had the chance to do that.
Yeah, me too. I really enjoyed the book. It's like I said earlier, it's the having the ability to know that there's the other side, right? The grass is greener, can allow you to build that resilience, and knowing that you can get through it and you can get back to where you were. Some of those stories were, my initial reaction was, nope, not going to happen. But, it's amazing to hear how they can do that.
Yeah. And, very poignant for all the things that we were rambling about prior to the interview. And for those of you that stuck through, sorry that we're a little disjointed on this particular episode, but that's just sort of the way my brain is working right now. So that's, you want vulnerability, you want real. There you go. That's where we're at.
I didn't want that much. Come on.
All right.
I thought we were going to just sprinkle it on a little bit here and there for the listener's sake, but No,
No.
it's real.
Welcome to the deep dive.
We're doing this show because it's real and we're vulnerable about it, and it's a struggle. So, to all of you who are listening, you benefit from our struggle.
And speaking of that struggle, it's I suppose we should do a challenge before we get out of here.
We should.
What do you got?
Last time though, you challenged me to talk to my daughter about feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And I have done that. And as a matter of fact, I think she's going to make a quick guest appearance.
Oh, yeah?
Natalie, come here. Hi. So I took on a challenge to talk to you about your feelings.
About what?
Have I talked to you about your feelings in the last few weeks?
No.
What?
No.
That's about as real as it gets right there.
Oh, but we have.
Oh, but we didn't.
Oh.
Try again,
Well, you
Dad.
know what? You know what? I fail as a father today.
You don't.
What?
Just
Oh, yeah.
today. Just today.
Why not? Why
You
do I?
let me play during this.
Yes. I did. Well, thank you very much.
Nice.
I love you. Don't forget to feel happy.
And nothing but happy all the time for your entire life.
I swear that she rolled her eyes so hard at me that she looked at the back of her head.
Awesome. All right, what do you got for me this week?
All right, so I've got it. So since I apparently did not complete our challenge,
Yeah,
which,
you suck.
yeah, I disagree with her assessment of that question. But the challenge that I've got for you this week is to, for the next 2 weeks, to take it one day at a time. Realize that while we are all running the marathon to the grave, just focus on this 1 mile for right now. Take it one day at a time and get through each day.
Yeah. Well, there's really no other way to do it, is there?
No, there's not. But sometimes we forget that.
Yeah. All right. Challenge accepted. And I challenge you to do the same, especially as we get closer to holidays and all the chaos and planning and nonsense that goes into celebrating these things. So,
Yeah. I think I'm just going to skip holidays from here on out.
Yeah, that's probably best.
Because I seem to remember last year, right after the holidays, that was the start of our conversation of, my diet that I've been doing so good on this year just went to crap.
Yep. And we still haven't recovered.
I know. It's amazing.
All right. Well, I think we've babbled long enough. We should wrap things up. For a link to the book that we're talking about on this episode, there is a link on our website, thefitmess.com. That is also where you can subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening and for spreading the word and sharing wherever you can. You can also sign up for our email list at our website. Basically any way you can think of to get in touch with us, just go to thefitmess.com and you'll find it all there, along with all of our past episodes and great blogs and whatnot. So that's what we've got for you for this edition of The Fit Mess. Thanks for listening. We will see you again in a couple of weeks at thefitmess.com.
See you, everyone.
We know this podcast is amazing and does not seem to lack anything, but we still need a legal disclaimer. Jeremy and Zach are not doctors. Please consult your physician prior to implementing any changes that you heard on this podcast. The listener assumes that Jeremy and Zach do not know what they're talking about and that you'll do your own research on the topics talked about in this podcast. The hosts of this podcast are not liable for any physical or emotional issues that might occur directly or indirectly as a result of listening to this podcast.